Happy Mother's Day, I should say.
Thank you.
Reading through the Bible or whatever, and I was trying to think of, something a little different, but try to stay in the Old Testament. And then I was reminded about a story. It's been about 13 months since we were in the book of Samuel. And the storyline came back to me. So I thought we'd go back to it. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for your love and your kindness, and help me speak your words and not mine, and open up our hearts for understanding that we may receive the message you have for us. Now, in the first chapter of Samuel, 1 Samuel, the storyline starts with, the birth of Samuel. So we hear about this Elkanah and his two wives. And remember when we preached on this 13 or 14 months ago, it was about the two wives, the Gentiles and the Jews, and their blessings that are, yet to come. But we're going to take a little different approach with it, being Mother's Day. So if you remember that, that Hannah was barren, okay? Peninnah, had lots of sons. And of course there would be that jealous rivalry between the two, but Elkanah loved Hannah dearly, okay? So even though when there were sacrifices to be had annually, he would, give all the necessaries for Peninnah, but he would give double, even though she did not have children. He would give the double requirement sacrifices to Hannah, which leads to her prayer. And that's kind of like where I was going, the mother's prayer. So 1 Samuel 1, verse 10, and she was in bitterness of soul, because remember, she was being teased and tortured by Peninnah, and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant, and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come to his head. No, I don't highly recommend making a bargain with God, because if it's like me and most of the people that I know, we have a tendency not to keep those vows. God always keeps his, but to make promises to God, or vows like that is very serious, because God will test you on those. So if you ever do make a vow to God, be prepared. We were talking, Marcy was talking earlier about the trials and testing and stuff, because God will test you to see if you're going to keep your vow. But she did keep her vow. So apparently Samuel grew up as a Nazarite, which meant no drink and no razors to his head, just like Samson in the Bible. And it happened as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli was the priest of the temple. Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke not with her mouth, but in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, How long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Now you got to remember, Hannah was year after year after year of not having children. She went to the temple and prayed like this, year after year. And the key words that I'm reading in this text is that she poured out her soul. in her prayer. Now, how often do we do that? How often do we pour out our soul to when we praise and sing to God? How often do we, pour out our soul when just in reading the text? Because God gives us so much. Do we give anything back to Him? Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace. And God of Israel grant your petition, which you have asked him. So Eli says, Go in peace, and may God, answer your prayers. Okay, so she did. She left, and she went back with a more lighthearted that because Eli acknowledged that her prayer was finally heard. Okay, and so when they traveled back home. She has a baby, and for years she didn't come back to the temple because she was wanting to make the next time she went to the temple, she wanted to, give the gift back to God. Now they said it was when the child was weaned. Back then it was very customary that would be at least 3 years. So it could have been even as much as 4 years. So the child was probably 4 years old when the mother, with that love gift, giving it back to God. And we talked about tithes, last week. It's not really giving in your abundance, it's giving in your lack. And also giving up that thing that divides you between you and God. The thing that you find more important. If it's money, then yes, it should be money you give up. Okay? But if it's time, it's most important to you. Or in this case, child. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking, could I do that? Could you? It'd be hard. I mean, it's not like you would see the child again, but yet those life experiences of raising a child, that's a big sacrifice. It's a huge sacrifice.
Oh yeah, parents who are separating or divorcing, they can barely stand to share custody.
Yeah. But yeah, it's to give up something that you love so much. Now that's a tithe. That's giving back to God. I mean, look what he gave up. What God gave up for us. Could we do the same? Are we capable? No. We fall so short. But Hannah does. And just like Marcy was talking about Paul and his suffering and stuff, what did he do? He praised God. What does Hannah do? Same thing. She praises the Lord. In Samuel chapter 2, it starts, and Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. Remember, the horn is your cup, your oil that God has poured into you. Okay, my horn, the Spirit, that I have is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies. We were talking this morning about having peace in the heart, because the enemies are not what she fears. It's God. Because I rejoice in your salvation. No one is holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you, nor is there any rock like our God. Here's some of those symbolisms we see in the New Testament. Jesus is the cornerstone that the builders protected. He is the rock. He's our foundation. Okay, we're seeing the same symbolism in the Old Testament too. Walk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is the God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and those who stumble are girded with strength. For those who are full have hired themselves out for bread, and the hungry have ceased to hunger. Even the barren has borne 7, and she has many children, has become feeble. Because see, in the world's eyes, what we think is wealth, what we think is riches, what we think is strength, right? That's what the world sees as strength. But God doesn't see those things. He sees the richness of a poor person. He sees the strength of the feeble. Okay? Everything that we see has been flipped over and upside down because it's not what God sees. God doesn't see these worldly things in our lives. The strength of a person is not really how strong he is. It's the strength of his heart. And many people would suggest that that's a weakness. But God says, no, it's a strength. Verse 6, the Lord kills and he makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he lifts up. He raises from the poor from the dust, and he lifts the beggar from the heap of ashes, to set them among princes and make them inherit the throne of glory. And the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. Now, notice in verse 8 is talking about princes, okay, royalty, right? The noble. But the reference of, being kingly, this is before, remember, Samuel was the one who anointed Saul, anointed David. So Israel did not have kings and the higher ups, So, we're talking about the King of Kings now, not the King of Jerusalem. Being lifted up, inheriting the throne of glory, inheriting the throne of God. Like we were talking this morning about being righteous, being a child of God. Okay, when salvation occurs, you're an heir. You're an heir to the throne of glory. And these foundations have been set up that we're just still trying to figure out today. And that, when Paul wrote Romans and stuff, all these foundational ideas and concepts were from the beginning about salvation and living a righteous life. It was all there since the beginning, since the foundations of the earth. But yet, we're still discovering those things. Verse 9, and he will guard the feet of the saints, but the wicked shall be silenced in darkness. For by strength no man shall prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. For heaven he will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his kings and exalt the horn of his anointed. Then Elkanah went to the house of Ramah, but the child ministered to the Lord before Eli, the priest. So this was her prayer. It sounds like more like a song or a praise that she proclaimed into the temple. And she's going into the end times, talking about that one day that God will judge. He will be a thunder against them, and how things will be. But it's amazing prayer or praise, I should say, not necessarily a prayer, but a praise to the Lord. And to end the story, and skipping down to 18, but Samuel ministered before the Lord, even as a child, wearing a linen ephod. Moreover, his mother used to make him a little robe and bring it to him year by year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. And Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "The Lord give you descendants from this woman for the loan that she has given to the Lord." Then they would go to their own house, and the Lord visited Hannah, so she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the child Samuel grew before the Lord. So a couple things, stand out to me. Elkanah and his wife, singular. What happened to Peninnah? What happened to his other children? They apparently didn't become important anymore. But yet, this goes back to last Sunday. You can't outgive God. She gave up the only thing that was precious, that meant anything to her, but yet God gave it back. 3 sons and 2 daughters. You can't outgive God. When you give of your heart, when you give in your lack and not your plenty, God will bless. And He'll make things right. So what things is in my life, or what things is in your life that you can't give up? We've talked many times about, even this morning, about sin, but what's that thing between you and God that you can't give up out of your life? If you do, your world will change. You'll be blessed. If anyone has a need this morning, feel free to come forward. We'll all be glad to